Excuse me?
Clarence was early today.
No traffic.
He says it makes up for yesterday.
Ready, Mick?
Yeah. Randy Gregory showing up with the knee. Is that the same thing you dealt with in training camp that you rested him a few days?
Pretty much, yeah. It's just something that's he's had in the past, and we're just being smart with him.
You don't think it'll impact his availability for?
I fully expect Randy to go. Yes.
Is Pollard back?
Excuse me?
Pollard back today, or what do you?
Yes, he's back.
Good news.
Yeah, good news.
Status quo.
Great
on the,
news.
Status quo on the COVID list as well.
Yes, nothing's changed. Both guys are in the protocol.
Mike, we were talking yesterday about Dak's command at the line of scrimmage. You've worked with a lot of quarterbacks in your career. Was there usually a certain point into their career that you started to notice a significant shift in their mastery, or just gradual over time?
I mean, it's definitely something that grows through their experience. I mean, I think that's, anytime you've had to play with a rookie quarterback, you clearly, build things in stages. There's particularly certain situations you highlight more than others as far as what you can do, because, just from my belief, the offense is built around that quarterback. So to give him the opportunity to be successful, it starts with a healthy run game. So, and you can just see by our first 3 games this season, people are going to, can load up the box or not load the box. So you have to have the flexibility within your run plan to take advantage of that. So the quarterbacks today have a lot more responsibility in run game in those types of offenses than they probably did 20 years ago.
Amari used the word multidimensional for this offense yesterday. How do you define multidimensional? Is it how deep you can go in the playbook depending on what your quarterback can do? Is it more just how many different personnel groups you can put out there?
I think when I think of multidimensional, it's the ability to get through the whole playbook. To be able to do the things that you're able to install, and that process starts in the spring, and you have the last season. You have scheme evaluation, then you start building your playbook through scheme implementation is what we call it, and bless you. And the thing is, to be able to set that plan earlier the better. I think it's a reflection of what do you think of your players, where do you think the quarterback's at, and I think with Amari's statement, it's just the fact that we're able to jump pretty freely A through Z, and especially in these adjustment type games.
You've said a lot of times last year there's just no comparable with last year because last year was so weird. Is that kind of the case with the offense in terms of how far along it is? Just no comparison this year to last?
Yeah, I think the big thing is when I talk about no comparable to last year, it's probably the more big picture things. I mean, because off season what didn't exist, the training camp was totally different. So your starting point with your team was different. The way you practice in the first half, so that's when I'm talking about comparables. Because like for something as simple as GPS, I don't really put a lot of weight into how we practiced last year. I put more weight in how I've practiced the 10 years prior to it, and even looked at the weight of how they practiced in 19, 17, and 18. So when I mean not compared to last year, it's more the big picture, structural, how you practice and what you're looking to get done in this environment. But when you talk about offensive scheme and defensive scheme, I mean, yeah, last year counted. So, I mean, now we had played with a number of different quarterbacks, but there are still scheme concepts that we lived in. So we were able to carry forward and build off of. I think we did the same thing on defense. I think Dan did an outstanding job of trying to capture what we felt we did well last year and pull it forward and then build off of that, because that was the big picture approach in the change on defense, since I got here.
When you were away from the game, how much did you look at some of the young up-and-coming coaches to say, when I get back in, I want him with me, that kind of
frankly, I think you're always building a coaching depth chart. I mean, that's something that I learned back in the early 2000s. You always, I even had an Excel sheet with an actual depth chart and things like that. But I think over time, watch what's going on. You can see the influence of college football in our game in the last 10 years too. So you try to keep in touch with who's in college, and and just I think we've talked about this last week. The resources are so much more in today's world, today's NFL, as far as being able to study the college game while the season's going on. Where in the old days you would I mean, there's times, I look back in the past, you're watching USC tape, in the personnel evaluation, get ready for draft, and you're like, my God, they had a hell of a year, didn't they? Yeah, they won a national championship. Because you're looking at the players, but then you also recognize the schemes that they do. But I just think with the resources and technology and, just really the talent of, some of the young coaches that we have on our staff, you're able to watch that stuff weekly.
Where was Kellen on that depth chart the year you were out?
He was obviously near the top.
The Carolinas ranked number one against the pass, number one against the run. Are they better at one or the other? Is the product of the game, the schedule? I mean,
Is that it?
which one are they better at?
I think you look at every game. I mean, you look at the things, who they played, how they played them. So I think that when you look at them, the scoring is what I've been most impressed with. I think that's, they've kept the games to a low-scoring game. But, they had a couple injuries last week, so it'll be interesting to see which way they go with us, as far as which way they try to tilt the defense. I mean, I would expect more pressure in this game than we've seen the first three weeks. So, and I'm sure it'll be definitely run pressures, particularly how we ran the ball last 2 weeks. So I think they're pretty balanced to answer your question.
This might tie into what you've talked about with the quality control guys, but how do you prepare in the case of Henderson, the guy who just got there Monday and you don't have tape of him with this team?
Well, I'll give them a personnel department some credit. Obviously we had the profile tapes on CJ when he came out, and obviously, that's something that starts on Monday. After we you recognize that he's going to be there, and Ben McAdoo actually worked in Jacksonville last year, so then you have a personal opinion. Ben's been a really significant help for us, just for the set of eyes and expertise that he's been able to give on both sides of the ball in a preliminary game plan. So all those things, factor into it, and I think you also got to recognize how much is he going to play. I mean, that's we're looking at that. We'll probably expect him to play more situational football, more scheme where he's particularly in man, because he hasn't been there a week. So you factor all those things.
Your players,
Go ahead, Drew.
your players have talked a lot about when they're running tempo, saying that maybe we're a little bit tired, but then we see how tired the defense is, and we're like, we can keep going. How do you judge before going out and running something like that, whether the conditioning level is where you want it, like you think it's good, or is it in game do you adjust?
Well, I think you build that. I mean, I think you start that in spring, and you have an idea, not only where your team is, on how you practice. Everything's recorded. Every snap of team. When we break the huddle, when we get to the line of scrimmage, when the ball snapped, every one of those snaps is recorded. So when you talk about tempo, you talk about pace of operation, you talk about clean communication. Well, how do you regulate it? How do you judge it? How do you support it? You do it with facts, and so that's part of our everyday practice structure. So we're always trying to push that, because I'm not a believer in running conditioning drills. If you practice the right way, and you can, and GPS is a nice tool to confirm how each guy works each and every day. There's a lot of good information that comes off of that. So those are the things that we look at every day. Britt Brown and Harold Nash and I have a 4:00 standard GPS meeting after every practice, so we know exactly where each guy is, and and that coincides with the training department, how they feel each guy is, and then we circle back in the morning, and if we need to tweak somebody's reps or so forth, and so I mean that's all part of administrating and creating the structure, but the conditioning comes in the way these guys practice, and our guys have done a great job in that area.
When did the GPS become big for you? I know it's only been around for a few, but when did you?
Probably around 2010, 11. I want to say. I don't remember the exact year. A former strength coach, Mark Lavatt, actually did a study. He went to Australia and spent some time with those guys down there, and they were, frankly, in my opinion, were a little ahead of the game in that area. So that training concept, something that we actually studied and looked at. And I was on a certain schedule. It's probably similar to what Jason did here. It was more of what I would refer to as a traditional schedule. And we researched this whole launch, track mentality, training regimen. But it took me probably 2 to 3 years to pull the trigger on it, because I just didn't feel like I was comfortable with it yet. So that's when we went away from the Friday practice, went into the Saturday. And there's a lot of scientific protocols that go into that. And I give Mark a lot of credit because he's the one that drove the deal. And just now bringing that here, that concept here, our players, have really responded and have actually done a very good job of it, adjusting to this schedule much quicker than my past experience. So I think that helps guys over the long run. Everybody practices a certain way. It's early in the season. Everybody's trying to get their team to play the way you want them to play. But I think over the course of the season, this schedule has a lot of benefits to it. The rest and recovery built into the work week is something that our players can see and they can feel. It's not something they have to do on their own. So, and so much that we do from a group dynamic standpoint is about regulation and routine. And once again, I think with the 17th game also, these are all positive attributes for us.
Why did it take so long to implement? Was it just because?
Stubborn Irish guy, yeah. Just.
I mean, it was a big change, so that's a.
Well, I mean, we were winning. There was no reason to say, hey, we got to change our schedule. We used to have the old schedule where, Friday afternoon when they came off the practice field, it was 48 hours. They had the 48-hour rule where their bodies were totally physically shut down. Then you had the 24-hour rule that, Saturday at noon that their minds were free to get themselves ready. So, there's a lot of time and energy into the old schedule, and the old schedule worked, But this, we were on a team that had been to multiple playoff games, and you're thinking, okay, is there something more we can do for that December, January football? So, I think like anything, and we'll always do that here, whether it's offense or defense. This game evolves. You can't ever just line up and do the same thing every year because, you're eventually they're going to catch up to you or you're going to get left behind. So I was always looking for how can we be better in December? How can we be better in January? So that's why I just took me a couple of years to get comfortable with it, and it's been a great change.
Was it an Aussie Rules football team that he went and watched? Who did he go study?
Yes, he went down there and visited a few of the clubs down there.
The lack of player selfishness on offense, how does that compare to other teams that you've had?
Very comparable. I think when you make it clear that the system's built around the quarterback and you have the quarterback with the personality and presence and command of Dak Prescott, it all falls in line, frankly. And it's nothing against our perimeter players. Our perimeter players they better still want the ball, because it's part of that personality that makes them what they are. But at the end of the day, it's about what's best for winning, and this is the best way to win, because to beat the good defenses, the great defenses, your third, fourth, fifth option, they got to win. And those games are coming, and we may be in one Sunday, So, when defenses are aggressive to take away certain playmakers on your team, you got to have answers, and that's a pretty good answer, in my opinion.
Do you have to develop any of that, where a guy might come into the building and think, I want the ball, and then you have to really establish, we care more about winning than we do your touches?
Well, I think it's like anything. It's all part of your daily messaging. It's communication. It's really, frankly, the relationships, between the coaches and the players and the players and the players. I think it runs all the way through. So at the end of the day, I'm not trying to hold anybody back from having great individual success, but the team's success is first. I think we all recognize that.
Thank you.
Thank you.